What's good YouTube? Welcome to my channel, Lifestyle and Conditioning. The science-based lifting community misunderstands volume and how well volume actually works and how well it actually translates outside from a study to real people. A big major problem we're talking about training volume in terms of translating that from a study to real world application is this. If you have a study that lasts 4 or 8 weeks, that's not a very long time. But whatever training volume that is used within that time frame and people manage to get results from that, perfect, fine. But the moment you take that and translate out to the real world and have to extend that to half a year or 2 years, then it's a completely different ball game. A lot of people can get away with really high volume for a very short period of time without any sort of complications. But the moment you start dragging this out for a prolonged period of time, this is actually where you can run into a lot of issues. You cannot maintain a super high volume for a very long time. Either you will get overuse problems, connective joints problems, something else, or it will simply be too much where life stresses will get in the way of your recovery and then you can no longer recover and you will essentially get into a state of overtraining. The absolute biggest problem when we're talking about training volume is that the more you do certain movements, the more stress you're going to put through that particular joint. And some joints on some people can handle more than others. But eventually something will break if you keep trying to push the ceiling of how much your body can handle. Which is why it's a problem if you're trying to follow these science-based papers where we have 30 or 40 sets for muscle group per week. Not only if you were to follow it will it mean that you'll spend an exorbitant amount of time in the gym, and it's not going to make that much of a difference in terms of how much muscle you're going to grow on a month-to-month basis versus doing the normal consensus of 10 to 20 sets. Even 20 sets per muscle is pretty high standard to set. If you were to do 20 sets on all your muscle groups per week, at some point that's just going to be too much. Even more so with some of the newer papers showing 30 or 40 sets is better. But how long can you realistically sustain it? And sustainability is the major question. When we're talking training volume, there has been also this thing coming forward called fractional sets, where particular movements will count for half a set or 1/3 of a set or some other basically arbitrary percentage of a set. So if we start dealing with these sorts of arbitrary ways of counting a set or half a set or something else, then we are starting to look basically at a math equation. And then instead of just figuring out how much volume you can do and recover from and get results from, then it becomes a math problem. And I don't think that's the reason why most people lift, is to sit down and calculate how many sets for each muscle that you're actually training, how many sets a week are they doing and how many should they potentially be doing instead. I don't think that's the reason why people would be lifting. So when we're talking about having 30 or 40 fractional sets, and then we have to look at these basically arbitrary, it's completely arbitrary. If you say a lat pull down is half a bicep set, or bench press is half a tricep set, and then 1/4 of a shoulder set or something like that, it becomes a completely arbitrary ballpark, and it makes no sense looking at it in this way, rather than just trying to look at what is the major muscle group movement. So bench press, major muscle group, chest. Okay, shoulder press, major muscle group, shoulders. And then look at the prime mover for that and then count it as a set for the prime mover instead of looking at all these fractional sets and having to do some sort of equation to figure out how many sets you're doing. It doesn't matter if science says that 30 or 40 sets for muscle group per week is better than 10 to 20 sets, because realistically speaking, you cannot sustain that. And if you cannot sustain it, then it's basically irrelevant. Unless you want to have periods of time where you will be borderline overreaching and then spend a large amount of time after that letting your body recover and rest, and then you can start training a bit more normal again. But if you spend 2 months basically overtraining, and you're going to have to spend the next 2 or 3 months doing like really soft training because you have overstrained your joints and connective tissue, and then after 2 or 3 months of low training, then you can go back into normal training again of the 10 to 20 sets or so, and then potentially maybe go up to the really high training again. At that point, you will be spending a lot of your time essentially treading waters, so you will be going absolutely nowhere. Thank you for watching. Lasting condition.